What's up, everyone? They made the terrible mistake of letting us get to Friday once again, so here we are for another episode of the TheLeaf podcast. A lot of times on this channel, I do a lot of cryptid encounters, if you couldn't tell already. But sometimes, you don't encounter the cryptids. Sometimes, they encounter you. And what I mean by that is that sometimes they follow you, they stalk you, and sometimes they meet you where you don't really expect them to be. And if you were around for memes in the 2000s, you may have the urge to make a really bad "in Soviet Russia" joke. In Soviet Russia, cryptid finds you. That was terrible, but it just came in my head and it wasn't going to leave until I mentioned it. So I don't really have a coherent title for this one. It's more just people encountering cryptids that are encountering them, I guess. Like, whatever it is came after them. There was no like, oh, it's checking me out, or oh, I'm in its territory. These are times when the cryptid is kind of just after you. So this first report comes from October of 1995. The witness, only known as Tango, was out camping with his family and his dog in the White Mountains of the U.S. state of Arizona. Now at this time it was coming on dusk, and the family hadn't managed to find a camping spot yet. They were driving along this narrow camp road, and it was getting pretty dark. You know that type of dark where you can still kind of see, but the darkness is definitely beginning to cling to things. So at some point of driving down this road, they stopped to turn the car around and just head back. Basically, they were hoping to find some other place, maybe somewhere along this road that they had missed on the way through. They got this weird feeling like they shouldn't go any further, so they didn't. They turned around and tried to leave. As they were coming back down this road, though, a little girl appeared in the road. Now, of course, in this instance, your first instinct, especially at a campground, is thinking, oh, this girl must be lost. Because it can happen a lot, especially when it's getting dark. You know, a kid has to go to the bathroom, and they just kind of get lost. So, of course, the father steps out of the vehicle and tries to help the little girl. But the mysterious girl, who was wearing tattered clothes and was in her bare feet, appeared very frightened about something. She said, "You shouldn't be here. Go back." The family tried to console her, but when they got near her, she just kept repeating the same line, "You shouldn't be here. Go back," before running off into the brush before they could stop her. They called after her to try and get her to come back, but she was just gone. The calls went unanswered. So the family at this point could really do nothing else besides keep going. This was in the mid-90s, and cell phones weren't really widespread then. And even if they were, have fun getting service in an area like this, especially a campground. So they continued on back down this road. The whole time, their moods had shifted from being like a typical happy family to being disturbed. That ominous experience really weighed on them. Eventually they did find a campsite, but their mood was kind of ruined. They set up their tents in silence, wondering if that girl was still out there. And then even the weird feeling of maybe watching them from the shadows. So after they did all this, they got a fire going and tried to settle down after a long day on the road. And then all of a sudden, all of them got this simultaneous sense of dread. The same dread as before, the same dread as if they were being watched. This was followed by a screech from out in the black of night, and then there was something that loped out of the trees and into the firelight. And this is a quote from the witness about what they saw. "It had sharp teeth and no fur. It was the size of a bear, but its eyes were yellow. I was frozen in fear. It stood for 10 seconds in the light and then galloped off into the forest. I was horrified. My dog was whimpering and curled its tail between its legs. This was the most horrifying experience in my life. This creature was extremely skinny, and it looked like flesh and bones. The disturbing image of this thing is implanted in my head forever. Now, my first question when I read through this, and it could be yours too, is are the girl and this entity related at all? And if they are, how? Now, I know we all know stories where things are shapeshifters, and if that's the case, was this thing that appeared in the firelight, did it take the shape of a little girl? Is the little girl like a spirit that was maybe taken by this thing, and it's like a warning sign? I don't know. Let me know what you think. In my experience though, and I will not go into great detail about this unless you guys find it interesting, but I've been to houses that had multiple entities in them, multiple spirits, and sometimes one was a harbinger for another one, usually one that was kind of connected to the other one, but sort of oppressed by it. So whenever one would show up, it meant that the other one was not far behind, and usually the other one was the one who did a lot of bad things. I'm not saying it's the same thing here, I'm just saying, was this being supernatural instead of just a general cryptid? Like, instead of being a straight up animal, flesh and blood, was it some kind of supernatural entity? And I guess I can connect this to various theories that you hear about Bigfoot and about Dogman, how they are more supernatural. I know that a long time ago on the channel, sent in a story about Bigfoot using certain kind of nexus points in the forest to be able to turn invisible, or be able to teleport, I guess is the best word for it. And I said that around where I live, or in my province, I don't know about other places, but I heard some stories from the res about Bigfoot being able to go into these weird sections of trees that were like triangles, like they were all 3 points, and they could somehow interact with this area and turn invisible. Again, it sounds so bizarre and strange to say it out loud, but you kind of wonder if they are supernatural, or if they can somehow interact with forces that we don't. I don't know. I guess that's why they call it high strangeness, isn't it? A lot of it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And with Dogman, it's kind of like that story that was in the other video, where the guy was just climbing over the snowbank to take a dump in the woods, and then suddenly he's teleported, or suddenly he's found himself further in the forest than he had ever intended to be, and there's something in the darkness that's following him, or after him, and it feels like that he just came to, and he was extremely exhausted afterwards. I'm not saying that was a Dogman, I just kind of inferred that from the fact he said that he heard a sigh, like a dog would, so I just kind of put 2 and 2 together. But yeah, do you think that these two things, these two beings, the girl and the whatever that was, are connected? And if so, how are they connected? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And I will, of course, link that article that I told that story from. I think it's the first story in the article, so if you wanted to check it out, there's lots more in that article as well. I just picked that one out. And this next story has a similar air of something finding you. This is an experience of a guy's grandfather, who he calls Pop. One of my clients and pretty good friends had a customer whose father-in-law was alleged to have been reduced to a neurotic child by a terrifying Sasquatch encounter. I went to speak with the son-in-law, but the old man, Pop, was extremely hesitant to talk to me about it. I know who Pop is because he's very accomplished in a mechanical field that I'm very interested in. His overall reputation as a person is stellar. Now, Pop loved to hunt. When he neared early retirement, he and his wife got some land in Smith County, Texas, so he could hunt often without all the disruption of traveling to different places. This both satisfied his wife, and he hoped to retire in peace. In November of 2019, he was in his very nice, north-facing custom deer stand on his land, about 1,500 feet from the house, when he heard footsteps coming from the south. Once the steps got about 50 feet away, he barked out a trespassing warning to leave and never come back. He could not see behind him because the stand is mounted in a very large tree. The footsteps stopped. Then, in 4 quick strides, the creature approached just to the side of the tree, slightly forward of it, and spun around and looked right at him. Pop started screaming, and this upset the creature, which screamed too, and approached the stand and jumped up. It was trying to reach him, or at least grab the bottom of the stand and pull the whole thing down. For reference, the bottom of the stand was 15 feet off the ground. Once he got his wits a little assembled, Pop went on the defensive and leaned up to donate a .270 round to the animal, but he was shaking so bad that he dropped his gun over the rail, which threw him into a panic. The Sasquatch had already touched the bottom of the stand twice, and Pop felt like his life was in extreme danger. Survival mode kicked in hard, and he went for the only weapon that he could think of, cans of iced tea. Right as he leaned down to open the cooler and snatch a can of tea, the Sasquatch backed up a few steps, as though it were trying to get a running start so it could jump higher and get him out of the tree. Pop sprang up and chucked a can of tea as hard as he could at the Sasquatch and nailed it right square in the upper face, which made it double over and groan loudly, hands over its face. It seemed surprised and disoriented. Then Pop poured the ice and water from the cooler on it, and that caused it to wig out in grand fashion. Just as he followed by throwing the cooler at it, he missed. The Sasquatch tore off into a nearby tree line by the creek and watched him through a crook in a tree, rocking side to side. Right then, Pop was hit with the realization that he had his Colt 1911 with him in his backpack. He dug the gun out of the bottom of the bag and aimed at the creature's head and fired. Nothing happened. He didn't have one up the snout. So he then racked the slide, and right then the thing took off into the brush to the north. It crossed the creek and was shortly out of sight. Pop got one shot off and is certain that he missed by a wide margin. He waited a short while and dismounted the stand to return home. He was white as a sheet and crying when he got there, and it was the first time in 32 years that his wife had ever seen him noticeably scared. Since then, he refuses to hunt. He won't go past the tree line around the house. He won't even leave the patio after sunset. And then in March of 2020, Pop's truck broke down on the thickly wooded private dirt road leading from the FM to the house. He was stranded in the middle of a sunny afternoon, about 700 feet from the house. Instead of walking home, he shut himself in the truck and kept calling people on his cell phone until he found someone to come and get him for the 20-second car ride to the house. His son-in-law received a hysterical voice message. Pop was practically sobbing, begging for him to come help, so the guy had to drive all the way from Nacogdoches to give a hardened combat veteran and lifelong adventurous hunter/outdoorsman a very short ride from the front yard to the front door. On him at the time, Pop had a .44 Magnum Colt Python, which he always carried with him. There have been some other curious incidents, but nothing like the terror in the tree stand. Hopefully, I can gain access to the land. The family is urging him to at least talk to someone who knows about these animals. It's sort of close to home, and if I can gain an inroad, I'll be headed out there soon. So what do you think happened in this one? Do you think that because he screamed at the thing, or that he yelled at the thing, that it took it as a threat, and that it tried to neutralize the threat, I guess? I also know that in some parts of the United States and Canada, that there are some Bigfoot that have a different kind of personality type. They're more hostile. They're more, I want this territory, so I'm going to take it. Do you think that's the case? Or do you think that the Sasquatch was just kind of always there, but he just never saw it, even when he had moved in? But not gonna lie, I did get a little bit of a chuckle out of the thought of someone just beaming a Sasquatch in the head with a can of iced tea. And for some reason I pictured it being Arizona iced tea too, so it's like a bigger can and it's kind of hefty. But no, let me know what you thought. And about the fear afterwards, I found that interesting because I've linked Sasquatch to aliens and UFOs before, but I didn't link it myself. I was just saying various theories. Now, I have to wonder if this is some kind of supernatural thing as well, or an extraterrestrial thing. And the reason why is because of how, after an experience with ETs, some people's personalities totally change. Like a person who's a hunter now hates guns. A person who loved to barbecue now is vegan, now hates meat. So, do you think that maybe it's kind of something similar? Can these creatures make you feel a certain way? Can they make you change your personality in some form? Or do you think it's just the fact that he came face to face with a Sasquatch that just really scared the shit out of him? Let me know what you think. And with that, I think I will leave it here. And if you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. If you enjoy the channel, then maybe you'll donate to the PayPal or Patreon, or just watch another video. It all helps the channel, and I hope to see you on Sunday. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for making it to Friday with me. And I'll see you Sunday.